Now we're going to go into a fairly detailed description of how that infinite consciousness that precedes everything becomes everything that is perceived, everything that is felt, everything that is thought, everything that is experienced. And we're going to take us through 36 levels, or Tattvas. Tattvas means thatness, 36 levels of thatness, of how infinite consciousness becomes this apparently tangible experience of life.
So we'll start where it all starts, Padma Shiva Shakti, that complete underlying infinite potential of potentiality, the awareness and the energy that enlivens awareness.
Now, that infinite reality is described as passing through three main levels. The first level is described as pure creation, in which there's still nothing that is manifestly known, but it's getting ready to be. So bear with us. This is a very subtle level. So
to the next, click. So we have Shiva. Okay, so again, Shiva is this underlying consciousness, that which is just the pure knowingness.
But at this point, there's a beginning of the separation of Shiva and Shakti. So here, Shiva is named as apparently distinct from Shakti, whereas that Paramashiva, you could not make. There isn't any way to make a distinction, and no one to make a distinction. But once this manifestation begins, then Shiva and Shakti begin to be noticeable as distinct facets. So the next one is Shakti.
And Shakti here, so Ananda is bliss, right? So it's the love of aliveness. So that the love of creativity, of creation, is when you start to see the awareness and the Shakti begin to have slightly distinguishable aspects. Okay? There's the pure awareness, and then there's the love of creation.
But notice that these are all Shakti.
They're all Shakti.
Because once anything begins to manifest, then we're talking about Shakti. But she starts by also having this Shiva aspect and the Shakti aspect. Next, please.
So then we have the absolute will, Icha Shakti, okay, which is limitless in the universal. Right? The will can do whatever she wants, period. There is nothing that's off limits in the universal will, in Icha Shakti.
Next, please.
Sada Shiva.
Then the next manifestation is Jnana Shakti, absolute power to know, omniscient power.
And the next one is Sudha Vidya, or Kriya Shakti, okay, which is absolute capacity to act, omnipotence, do whatever it wants. Okay, there's the will, right? There's the knowing, and there's the ability to act, unlimited. Okay, so this is still pure. This is what we call pure creation before it starts distilling down.
And we're going to explore these five later, we'll do a sort of meditation on these in an experiential way. But we're going to move on for the time being. So next, then comes in what's called Maya. Here, it's the veil of limitation that is described as similar to a prism. So if you pass plain light through a prism, it immediately fracks into multiple colors. This is not delusion. This is the way manifestation happens. So that's the name of this veil by which things can become manifest.
Now, what's so interesting about the word Maya, so Maya is often interpreted as or defined as illusion, right? It's the illusion of things. the limiting veil. Okay? But Maya also means to meter things out, to measure. So it is that which takes what is completely undifferentiated, right? And then begins to meter it out, which is therefore where we begin to have time and space. And it's only in the Maya that time and space, the metering, it's also the mother, that's the only place it can be experienced, is in the metering. Because otherwise it's undifferentiated. There's no experience to have. Okay, so the Maya is really, really beautiful because it creates the possibility of knowing. Again, the only way to Shiva is through Shakti. Only way through Shiva is through Shakti.
So then the next 5 levels are all veils of those original 5 Shaktis that we see in the pure. Now we see that the limiting veils, or the Kanchukas. So next, please. So Kala is limited omnipotence. Next, please.
And then Vidya is limited omniscience or ignorance.
Raga, limited omnipotence.
Kala, which is limited eternity or time.
And lastly, Niyati, the limit of omnipresence of space.
So you see, we begin to meter out, right? Time, space, ignorance of the totality in order to experience
Limited knowingness, limited capacity to act.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Next, please. So then we come into more the description of each of us as an Anu. So Purusha is the subjective sense that we have. Everybody here has this sense that, yeah, the subjective sense. That the word I usually refers to this subjective sense.
And Purusha also it's very interesting because in modern psychology, the naming of that sense of myself, right, is metacognition, right? It's this very simple aspect of us that observes our experience. It observes our thinking, our feelings, our senses, all of that, right? But it's generally the ignorance, right? The veiling is that that's somehow understood to be limited to the confines of my skull. So Purusha, the limited view. And then Prakriti is the objective. It's everything else out there, right? Out there being everybody here and the chairs and the floor and the walls, but also out there being the thoughts and the feelings and the sensations. The objectives, the objects of consciousness, the subject of consciousness, the Purusha, the objects of consciousness, Prakriti.
And hopefully you're here with us here. We're talking about you.
In your direct experience.
Notice that you have a sense of subject.
Both of you.
Yeah. In other words, notice that you have a subjective sense and you have an objective sense. That's the nature of experience. So next, please. Then we have these really subtle powers, each of us. Buddhi is the intellect, the intelligence by which we are able to discern anything. The way that we can discern what the temperature of the air is, or anything that we can discern, it's because we're using this amazing intelligent power.
And then we have the ahamkara, which is the ego. Okay? The ego being the limited narrative of self.
And then,
which is important.
Oh yeah.
Because like when somebody calls your name, you need to know they're calling you, right? So it's an important piece.
It's functional.
It's functional. It's absolutely 100% functional. It's not ultimate reality, but it's functional.
How different is that from the limited view of self, sense of self?
Hold that question for.
Can you highlight it, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
And then manas. Manas means mind. So intellect here is distinct a little bit from mind, because intellect is that power of pure discernment, but mind is that which thinks about and compares and kind of cogitates and remembers and
anticipates for lunch.
Yeah, and remembers what seems to be past, anticipates some future, gets very distracted from right now. So that's the activity of our regular mind.
And then out of the ahamkara, the ego, is a set of powers that arise. So the indriyas. So go ahead and go to the next one. So we have the powers of perception, jnana, our ability to hear, to touch, to see, to taste, to smell. These arise, right? These are powers of perception.
And then next, the powers of action. So speaking, grasping, locomotion, excretion, and procreation.
And then also we have then the elements that arise. So we have the tanmatras, the subtle elements of sound, touch, form, taste, and smell.
And lastly, the mahabhutas, or the gross elements. That's covered, but so this would be earth, water, fire, air, and space. Those are the, like we're all here in space. Everybody is seated on something solid. That's earthy. There's, water flowing through our body and the blood and everything. There's
digesting your food.
There's the fire is digesting our food. There's the air that we're breathing. In other words, this is all right here. So we've taken you through the 36 levels. Here we've landed where everything that is experienced can be subsumed in one of these tattvas.
And just curious, as you look at that chart, can you see where it is that maybe you hang out most of the time? Like kind of where you tend to orient, like where your biases are? I think we all have them, right? It's somewhere. And that's so we start to see, oh gosh, wow, I'm really, anchored in the energy, the power of action right now. Right? So you begin to see kind of what that momentary experience is in the expression of this unfolding.
So long before I knew anything about Kashmir Shaivism, I had just met my teacher, Muktananda, 9 months before, had received a very powerful inner awakening, Shaktipat, what we referred to earlier. And then he had sent me, I had been living in Mexico City for about 3 years before that, and he sent me back to Mexico to help set up a meditation center there. So I was meditating one day. At that point, very few people, only 3 or 4 other people living in the meditation center. So I was all alone one morning before I went to work, seated in meditation, when I felt a very, very powerful surge of energy in my body. And it arose to this spot here that's called the third eye. And then there was a total collapse of the universe, collapsed into this point. And at that point, it's hard for me to find words, but at that point, I was infinite consciousness, in which there was no universe, and there was no time, and there was infinite energy surging. I call it energy because there was nothing separate, but there was a surging of infinite bliss or energy. And then at a certain point, that infinite energy surged and bang, all of this happened. All of this, and there was all of these phases simultaneously. I say simultaneously because it seems sequential, but it's not, because there isn't. I can't really give it words, but suddenly there was this body sitting again in the meditation hall, and a whole day went by in which it was unlike any other day of my life, a day in which there was no narrative at all. There was no, the story of I was not there. Only the next morning when I woke up from sleep was there again a sense of being this person named Jim. During that previous day, I have very clear memory, but there was no sense of there being anything that distinguished, even though there was a viewpoint, but in that viewpoint there were no boundaries. There was nothing was separate. It was a unitary experience. When I woke up the next morning, and again I sensed myself, the narrative of, the story of I came back, I knew that it wasn't true, and I could never doubt again. I could just never doubt again that, in fact, what I am and which each person is, and which each facet of reality is fundamentally that reality, that it does not have boundaries or separations in it. And that all happened by sheer grace. There was nothing that I had done to bring about that revelation. It just happened spontaneously through the grace of this lineage. But from that point on, I began to be able to discern things about, so almost any scripture that I would pick up after that, it was very clear what they were describing. Whereas before it would be confusing, and then it became really clear. Yeah. And especially this description in Kashmir Shaivism, I haven't found a description that better fits what that revelation was like for me than this description. And here's did you want to say a little bit before we bring up the Shri Yantra?
Shri Yantra. So, what is so beautiful about this experience, as he describes it, is that it is such a direct perception of what this mapping is, right? It's like, the mapping, it's not a conceptual map. It's actually the experience of the sages of Kashmir Shaivism and other traditions as well. But Kashmir Shaivism has articulated that this is how it unfolds, right? And then you can probably hear in this description too, there's Shiva, there's this just aware presence of there's the mandala, which is the totality of manifestation, right? And then there was the Anu, there was this view, but the Anu was not separate. The Anu was completely contiguous with Shiva Shakti. So the Trinity and the 36 Tattvas co-occur. They co-occur. So the Tattvas are just describing, well, how does the Trinity dance into creation? What is that mapping?
So next slide, please. So this is a representation of this infinite creative expression called Shri Yantra. And if you look right in so first of all, it's made out of lots of triangles and lots of threes, right? And in the very, very center is a little dot. That's the bindu, that's the Anu, right at the center.
And I have to tell the story
Go ahead.
about Shri Yantra. So Shri Yantra is considered the mother yantra. Like this is considered the top symbolic display of creation, of how creation is being spontaneously birthed into the moment. So this is the symbol. This is the great mother, the Shri Yantra. And I knew nothing about any of this. And I was sitting in this temple that I so adore. That's of my primary teacher lineage. And I was just sitting there in meditation, just minding my own business. And all of a sudden, I have this experience, this view of a golden Shri Yantra tumbling out of my heart in every direction. Millions of Shri Yantras just literally spilling out of my heart in all directions. And she was so powerful that if I didn't know better, I would say that I was levitating. Like just the force of emanation was so powerful. And so what's so beautiful about that, for me, about that experience was the great goddess of creation sits right in the center of you. Sits right in the center of you. Yeah.